Hello and welcome to Tank and AFV News. This is another video book review. This week we are looking at Hungarian Armored Forces of World War II. This is part of the Kagero Photosniper series. This book is by uh, Peter Mujzer. I'm sure I'm probably saying that wrong. Um, for those that are not familiar with the Photosniper series, they're fairly large sized books, so for sake of comparison, here is an Osprey New Vanguard title, which probably most of you have seen in the hobby shops. Um, so quite a bit smaller. This is also quite a bit thicker page-wise. So this one is about 130 pages. It's actually quite a bit more than the standard Photosniper series book. So this earlier one here on the Leclerc, you can see is this new book. Focus there. Yeah, you can see it's quite a bit thicker. Most of these run, bumping my tripod. Most of these run more around 90 pages. This one, like I said, is around 130. Now this one is, it's not strictly just a photo. Despite the name, you would think it would be just a photo collection, but it's actually got quite a bit of information in here. This is a pretty in-depth examination of the topic. And so we will sort of dive into it here so you can see what it has. Go in. One thing that's slightly annoying is there's no index, which I always like an index, but they didn't put one in here, so be it. And it starts off with introduction and sort of background information, talking about the state of Hungary after World War I. Of course, Hungary as a nation before World War I, it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, so it was a much bigger part of a more major power. Then after the war, they suffered quite a bit in terms of loss of territory, particularly loss of industrial capabilities and economic power. So the development of Hungarian armor is a story sort of having a lot to do with lack of resources and also having to do a lot of stuff in secret because they weren't supposed to be developing. Much like Germany wasn't after World War I, Hungary also was in the same position where they weren't supposed to be developing these kind of weapon systems. Some of this stuff was supposed to be prohibited, but they were going ahead and developing it in secret anyway. And a lot of that involved importing foreign designs, which a lot of their vehicles were based on. So anyways, you can see, so Chapter 1, Hungarian troops in the early years. Italian connection, because obviously they were getting equipment from their organization and equipment of armored forces. So quite a bit of history in here. So this book is going to definitely be of use for people that are sort of armor historians who are looking for information on that. But as you can see, there's also plenty of photos. So for the model builder, there's going to be plenty of things that will be worth looking at in this book. Here we go into final organization of armored forces, assault artillery, reconnaissance battalions, independent units. So you can see it just sort of goes through all these different topics. Here we have a section on training of armored forces. So information on some of the other European countries, armored forces, a little bit rundown. Charts comparative strength of Hungarian and other minor Axis armored divisions. Brief operational history of Hungarian armored forces, Yugoslav campaign, Soviet campaign. So it goes through the different campaigns here. Skip ahead a little bit. Obviously goes through the war itself, the Eastern Front, occupation of Ukraine. So lots of different things. So if you're looking for an overall history of the armored forces, you'll find that here. And then in the sort of second half of the book, it gets into specific chapters on the actual vehicles themselves. So you can see here is the section on the Toldi light tanks. A little further ahead, you get the Nimrod, the anti-aircraft tank. Let's skip ahead a little bit. You get into the Turin tank, their medium, which interesting vehicle. Certainly not one of the most effective vehicles of the war, but I think an interesting sort of adaptation of Czech technology put to use by another country and sort of expanded upon. The Zarini, the armored gun, the sort of their version of the Stug to a certain extent, and a few other things. You know, and then some real nuts and bolts information here is just nice. I mean, like production of armored vehicles, vehicle costs, ammunition rates of the armored forces vehicles. So certainly more than you're getting just your sort of your fan. It's a lot more than just your standard photo book. Then it goes through some of the other foreign vehicles that are Hungarian service. Synopsis, bibliography. So you can see it's a pretty decent sized bibliography. A lot of it is Hungarian sources and others. So it would seem certainly that this author did quite a bit of research in putting this together. Then you have some line drawings here, sort of, and then at the end a color photo section, mostly of like restored version, current vehicles that have been restored, colorized wartime photos. Definitely some interesting stuff, and then these kind of color drawings showing camouflage and insignia markings for quite a few vehicles. So plenty for the model builder in here as far as resources, plenty also for the historian. You know, one thing I'll say too is that you're probably not going to find in English a more in-depth and complete history of Hungarian armored forces. It just hasn't been much published. I know Osprey did one, a new Vanguard book that just covered minor Axis allies in Europe. And then I think the Green series did one a few years back. That used copies are quite expensive. So I would say if you're interested in the topic, probably snatch this one up now, because it's I suspect it's one that will not get cheaper as once it hits the used market, would be my guess. So I found it to be very informative, definitely a book worth purchasing. I do have one major complaint, and that is the writing is not very good. The content, the information being relayed is good. The writing, though, definitely, it's pretty obvious that this author, you know, I'm assuming he's Hungarian. Hungarian is his native tongue, and the English is a second language. And they probably should have had somebody proofread it and clean up some of the grammar. There's some clunky sentences. There's some grammatically incorrect sentences. So the flow, it can be a little jarring when you're trying to read. It doesn't flow very well. You know, I suspect that they just didn't have the budget to get a translator, or you know, to get somebody to really go over it with a fine-tooth comb, which is unfortunate, because otherwise it is just a really excellent book. So with that caveat, and again, it's, you know, you're probably going to be buying this for the information, not because you want to sit down and read it at the, you know, as you're falling asleep at night in your bed. You know, it's more of an information book. But I just wanted to note that's sort of the only real thing that I ding it on. According to the publisher sheet that they sent me, this one is $29.95 is the retail price. I'm sure you can get it cheaper online if you hunt around a bit. But for a book that's this sort of specific and with this kind of research and material, that seems like a pretty fair price to me. So I would give this one, despite, like I said, some of the problems with the English, some of the writing quality, I give it a couple of thumbs up. If you're looking to fill that hole in your library of stuff about Hungarian armored forces, it's definitely a worthwhile book to look into. So I hope you enjoyed this video, or at least found it useful, and we will catch you on the next one.